Story recapped here. Today, I'm going to explain a comedy, horror, and sci-fi film called Frankenhooker. Spoilers ahead, watch out and take care. In the Shelley household, Mr. Shelley is about to celebrate his birthday, so Mrs. Shelley is busy preparing. Meanwhile, their daughter, Elizabeth, has her fiancé over, Jeffrey Franken. But instead of joining the party, Jeffrey uses his lab equipment in the kitchen as he examines a seemingly sentient brain with an eye. So, Mrs. Shelley tells Elizabeth to check up on Jeffrey and reminds her to ease up on the pretzels. Dolores, Elizabeth's friend, asks whether she's in trouble with her mom, but Elizabeth says no. However, she adds that her mom thinks that Jeffrey is too strange while she's too fat. Elizabeth also states that she has tried multiple techniques to lose weight, such as liquid diets, seafood diets, vegetable diets, and many more, yet nothing ever worked for her. She even let Jeffrey staple her stomach, but it didn't help much. Knowing that Jeffrey only works in a power plant, Dolores is in shock that Elizabeth would let him do surgery on her. Dolores asks whether Jeffrey is a medical student, so Elizabeth tells her that he's only been kicked out of medical school 3 times. Still, she let him operate on her before because they're going to be married. Back inside the kitchen, Jeffrey tries to fix his malfunctioning lab equipment. Elizabeth then checks up on him, asking him to come with her outside. Moments later, Elizabeth shows her father a gift that Jeffrey made, a remote-controlled lawnmower. She happily demonstrates how to use it, but she mistakenly stands in front of the lawnmower despite Jeffrey's warning. Then, when the lawnmower turns on, Elizabeth gets caught in its blades as it goes straight in her direction, resulting in her gruesome death. Ever since the tragedy, Jeffrey has been obsessively drawing a plan to bring Elizabeth back to life with a new body. Then, while doing so, he re-watches the news segment about Elizabeth's death. Detective Anderson talks about Elizabeth's body, stating that they can't find some of her body parts. That night, Jeffrey's mother checks up on him because she's worried about his inability to move on, even though his mother tells him about a potential new partner. Jeffrey doesn't want to find anyone else. However, Jeffrey confesses that his mental health is deteriorating. He explains how he's not able to think clearly anymore, adding that he seems to be disassociating himself from reality. Not knowing what to do with him, Jeffrey's mother just offers him dinner, but he refuses. As she leaves him alone, she just makes him promise not to stay up all night. But of course, Jeffrey already has other plans. Jeffrey sneaks into the garage, where he retrieves Elizabeth's severed head inside a cooler. As it turns out, he's been hiding the missing body parts all along. He then places Elizabeth's head with other body parts on the table to have a romantic dinner with her, talking about his plan to revive her. He also brings out several pictures of Elizabeth's head glued to different photos of other women's bodies, with an idea in mind. All Jeffrey needs to do is find the live parts to make a new body for his girlfriend. After dinner, Jeffrey starts to feel guilty about the details of his plan because he knows that someone needs to die so Elizabeth can live again. Nonetheless, he motivates himself to get rid of the guilt because he wants his fiancée back. A storm is coming in 2 days, which will give Jeffrey enough electricity to put his plan into action. However, it also means that he has to find the body parts he needs within that time. Jeffrey then starts freaking out, so he performs trepanation on his head with a power drill to calm himself down. After collecting his thoughts, Jeffrey realizes that he can find the body parts he needs by buying prostitutes. So he goes to a red light district in New York to find women, where he encounters Honey, a woman desperate for customers. Honey immediately tries to do business with Jeffrey when she sees how much money he can offer. But Jeffrey tells her that he's looking for more than one woman. So Honey calls Amber, thinking that Jeffrey wants a threesome. Jeffrey then elaborates that he needs 6 to 7 women for a party, so Honey refers him to Zorro, their pimp. When Honey speaks to Zorro, Jeffrey immediately notices that she's been branded with the guy's initials. However, he doesn't say a word about it. Instead, he just talks to Zorro about what he needs when Honey leaves, and even buys drugs from him. At home, Jeffrey manages to make a super crack, a deadlier version of the drugs that he bought from Zorro. Then, while watching the news about some hookers, he imagines that one of the women is Elizabeth. Jeffrey starts freaking out about his plan because of that, so he calms himself down with the drill again. He starts justifying his actions by pointing out that the drugs will kill the women, not him. So, he tests the super crack on a guinea pig and notes that it can make the subject explode. The night to execute his plan has arrived, so Jeffrey meets up with Honey, who introduces him to the rest of the women: Angel, Crystal, anise, chartreuse, snow, sugar, and monkey, alongside amber. Under the guise of a medical examination, Jeffrey starts examining the women's bodies, looking for the perfect body parts he'll take for Elizabeth. Later that night, Honey tells Jeffrey to choose one girl because the rest of them need to go. However, Jeffrey is now having second thoughts, unable to pick anyone because he feels guilty and unsure whether his plan will work. When Honey gets mad because of Jeffrey's response, he angrily gives her his bag of money, not realizing that he left the super crack inside. Seeing the substance, the women start going crazy for it, even when Jeffrey tries to take it away. Outnumbered, Jeffrey fails to stop the women as they smoke the drugs and party amongst themselves. Meanwhile, Zorro is waiting for his hookers and starts getting impatient, so he furiously storms upstairs to see what's happening. Back in the room, the women are already starting to explode one by one. Everything descends into chaos, and no matter how much they scream, it's already too late for them. When Zorro arrives, he starts banging on the door immediately. Although Chartreuse attempts to open it, she fails because she explodes just as she touches the doorknob. With no other options left, Zorro starts breaking down the door. Meanwhile, an enraged Honey tries to sneak behind Jeffrey to stab him with a syringe. However, she explodes before being able to do so. Then, just as Zorro breaks the door open, Honey's severed head flies towards him and knocks him unconscious. Amidst the carnage, Jeffrey keeps apologizing to the dead women, promising to put them back together after he revives Elizabeth. But with no time to waste, he starts collecting the body parts and leaves through the fire escape. When Jeffrey gets home, he starts the revival of Elizabeth right away. With the hooker's body parts that he collected, Jeffrey tries to see which ones are the best to use. Jeffrey then assembles the body parts before finally adding the main piece, Elizabeth's head. Afterward, he keeps the remaining body parts inside the cooler. With the storm coming, Jeffrey opens the sunroof to lift the mechanism that's supposed to collect electricity up to the sky. However, as he watches the lightning strike Elizabeth's body, he doesn't see the electricity traveling down to his cooler as well. Afterward, Jeffrey retrieves his work to unveil the new Elizabeth. Unfortunately, Jeffrey immediately notices that Elizabeth is acting strange. Aside from only saying what the hookers used to say, her body is also moving awkwardly. Elizabeth, now a Franken hooker, slaps Jeffrey unconscious when he tries conversing with her. Then, while he's knocked out, Elizabeth leaves to find clients in the streets of New York. On the way there, the subway commuters look at Elizabeth with disgust and try to move away from her. Moments later, Jeffrey wakes up and notices that Elizabeth is gone. Trying to remember her words, he realizes that she's going back to the red light district, so he hurriedly starts driving there to find her. Meanwhile, Elizabeth comes across a man that's more than eager to come with her. They go to the same cheap hotel where Jeffrey examined Zorro's girls, and the man immediately removes his clothes upon entering the room. Elizabeth slowly joins him, but when they start doing the deed, the man ends up exploding from electricity. Then, when Elizabeth leaves the hotel, she encounters a man who flirts with her. He doesn't hesitate to make out with Elizabeth, so he ends up exploding too. On the other hand, Jeffrey arrives at the red light district and asks around for Elizabeth. He then encounters other hookers and asks them if they've seen his girlfriend, pointing out that she has a Z mark on her arm. Realizing that Jeffrey is talking about Zorro's girls, the hookers get angry and say they're all dead before walking away. So Jeffrey says they're coming back, but he catches the attention of another man, who asks him what he knows about the case. Trying to stay out of trouble, Jeffrey just drives away from him. In a bar, Zorro drowns his sorrows while his friend comforts him. Although Zorro knows what happened to his hookers, his friend doesn't believe him. Then, Zorro's friend notices Elizabeth entering the bar and tries to score with her. However, she ignores him when she sees the pretzels on the counter. She starts eating right away, and she even growls at the bartender when she tries to stop her. As Zorro's friend starts talking to Elizabeth, she just replies with Honey's phrases again, which Zorro notices. The eager man then takes her away to a secluded booth while Zorro subtly follows behind. Unfortunately, when the man goes down on Elizabeth, he explodes too. Because of the explosion, everyone around them starts freaking out. Meanwhile, outside, Jeffrey comes across a street preacher who points him in Elizabeth's direction towards the bar. On the other hand, Zorro finally realizes that Elizabeth's body isn't hers. He immediately confronts her about it, but she pushes him away. In retaliation, Zorro punches Elizabeth and ends up splitting her neck open, making electricity spill all over. The customers then run away in fear just as Jeffrey arrives. Upon seeing Elizabeth's condition, Jeffrey quickly puts her head back in place before bringing her home. Unfortunately, Zorro decides to follow them to find answers about his hookers. When they got back home, Jeffrey further secures Elizabeth's head to her body with stitches and screws. As he tries to revive Elizabeth again, Jeffrey hopes that she'll turn out correctly. Luckily, this time, the operation is successful, and Elizabeth wakes up as herself. However, she's confused, so she asks Jeffrey what happened after the lawnmower incident. Jeffrey then gives her a rundown of what happened, telling Elizabeth that she died, so he decided to bring her back to life. Upon learning this, Elizabeth tells Jeffrey how proud she is of his accomplishment and encourages him to share it with the world. But even though it can probably save many lives, Jeffrey points out that he can only bring back women with his estrogen-based blood serum. Still, Elizabeth is happy for Jeffrey. Unfortunately, that happiness doesn't last long when she realizes what Jeffrey has done to her. She says that she can feel many different women inside her, so Jeffrey starts justifying his actions, saying he did it out of love. Then as they argue, Zorro comes up behind them and beheads Jeffrey with a machete that he picks up from the table. Elizabeth screams in horror, but Zorro just ignores her. Instead, he starts to address his women and declares that he will take them back. Meanwhile, a hand slowly opens the cooler as Zorro prepares to give Elizabeth some drugs to get her in the right state of mind. When they finally realize what's happening to the cooler, they see that the body parts have turned into several grotesque Frankenhookers. They then crawl out and take Zorro inside the cooler, where he finally meets his end. With Zorro gone, Elizabeth takes Jeffrey's head to perform her own operation. Moments later, Jeffrey wakes up and sees Elizabeth in front of him. Seeing that Jeffrey is confused, Elizabeth says that Zorro came to kill him, so she had to do something about it. As Jeffrey starts to move, he realizes that Elizabeth also brought him back to life, using the other body parts of the prostitutes. Jeffrey then starts freaking out, but Elizabeth only mocks him by repeating his own words, saying she did it out of love. Unfortunately, there's nothing Jeffrey can do but scream.
Subscribe to watch more videos like this. Turn on notifications. And leave a like, it really helps the channel out. Thank you for watching.